I didn't have to rearrange my home life as such, but I did leave a permanent position that I'd been in AOD for 3.5 years to actually take on a time-limited contract with Bushfire Services. So I stepped into that role, and there was a few contracts that happened given the nature of the service. So until February, when the case management service closed, I was on contract, and I'm now on a contract as well. And for those that know me, they'd know, being a Cancerian, that that's a challenge in itself, being on contract work. So I think that both my team and myself made commitments both personally and professionally, and I had case managers that certainly had left permanent positions and that travelled from all around Victoria and the Melbourne area to actually come out to Kildonan, to Epping, to then service bushfire affected clients in Kinglake West, Flowerdale, Hurstbridge, St Andrews, Panton Hill, etc. So they travelled wide and far, and I think that was the uniqueness of this service, is that people were prepared to go above and beyond for the people that were affected.
Our home wasn't flooded, but I was actually in Canberra when the Brisbane floods were happening, and so I was watching this unfold on television because we keep our TV on Sky News going when disasters are happening, so that we've got as much information as possible to work with. And it was awful because it was my hometown and I was far removed from that, so it was very hard to watch that. And with the Christchurch earthquake, very personal impact, because my daughter and son-in-law lived there until about 6 months ago, and his family lived there and were affected by the disaster. So at a personal level, I didn't go to Christchurch, but at a personal level, you know, that had an impact for our family, which we needed to deal with. How I rearranged my home life, it was a very challenging period. I had signed up with my husband to get a new kitchen installed in January, February, and I actually ended up, while I moved to Brisbane fairly quickly and spent 3 weeks there oversighting the professional services response to the flood event. I really only went home to sleep. I saw very little of my family during that time, and so then I moved very quickly for 3 weeks to Cairns. And so at a personal level, my husband had to unpack all the old kitchen so it could be pulled out, and he wasn't best pleased. And during that period in the flood event, my son actually had to have surgery. And so having full confidence in the people who were working for me to keep the business going, because I needed to take that time out to be there when he had his surgery and after he came round, and there were some complications with that. So, you know, at a personal level, that was a bit of a struggle, trying to balance what my home and family responsibilities were with ensuring that, you know, an appropriate response was in place, and a very speedy and well organised response was coordinated in place. Was tricky to balance at times.
Well, I really couldn't say that it affected me personally to any great extent. My home wasn't affected, my family's home wasn't affected, so in a personal sense I wasn't. But in a work sense I was, in that the building that we were actually accommodated in as a team was flooded, so we had to be evacuated ourselves, and the warning system didn't seem to reach up to us, so the rest of the building was evacuated, but we on the third floor actually didn't get out for some time. But there was no danger to us, it was just that the lower levels were flooded. I guess the other impact is that when you're involved in disaster management, everything else goes by the board. So I had to walk out of my department, which meant that I very quickly had to get people to stand in for me. And fortunately, I have a group of really dedicated, really talented seniors who were all able to step up, and great people in the department who were able to backfill their seniors. So I had no worries about my workplace. The thing about disaster management, though, is that it just doesn't stop, that it's really a 24-hour sort of response. So for weeks and weeks and weeks, we were working incredibly long hours. We worked 7 days a week. We would come home to have a rest and then have to rush in and do something else. So in that sense, it was certainly extremely tiring.